All right, let's jump right in. When we think about development, our minds usually go straight to economists, engineers, big plans, massive spreadsheets, and huge infrastructure projects. But what if I told you the real blueprint for success, the one that actually works, comes from a totally different field? Yeah, we're talking about anthropology. And that brings us to the single most important question of this whole discussion. How do you go into a community to help, but do it in a way that truly works for them, that respects who they are, without accidentally making things worse? It's way, way trickier than it sounds. So, to even begin to answer that, we've got to look through the unique lens that anthropology brings to the problem. It's all about getting past the what people are doing and digging deep into the why. At its heart, anthropology is the holistic study of us, of people. It's not about looking at economics over here and politics over there and health in its own little box. No, it's about seeing how all of those things are connected, how they weave together to create the full 360-degree reality of a community. Okay, so how do they do it? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. A thinker named David Mandelbaum laid out these three key hallmarks. First, there's that holistic view we just talked about. Second, and this is a big one, is cultural relativism. That just means you check your own biases at the door and try to understand a culture on its own terms. And third, participant observation. This isn't about surveys from an office. We're talking about an anthropologist actually living in the community, eating the food, learning the language, becoming part of the fabric of daily life. It's total immersion. So that's the big idea, the theory. But how does all of that actually translate into action out in the real world? Let's take a look at how these concepts become a practical toolkit for making a real difference. So what's in this toolkit? Well, it all starts with those ethnographic studies, that deep, on-the-ground fieldwork. But, and this is crucial, it doesn't end there. They take those insights and help shape policy. A perfect example is N.K. Bose, an Indian anthropologist, who didn't just write reports about tribes, he used his knowledge to help build better, smarter government programs. And finally, they stick around to monitor and evaluate, to ask the tough question, is this thing we built actually helping? Now let's see this in action. We're going to look at some really powerful case studies, starting with development work inside tribal communities. This is where the human-centered approach really shines. Verrier Elwin is just a fascinating case. He literally spent his life living with tribes in India, and he learned things that planners would never see. For example, he saw that the Gond tribe's entire social world was built around their clan system. Now, that's not just a fun fact. It means any development project, to be successful, had to be designed to work through that clan structure. You work with the grain of the culture, not against it. So simple, but so revolutionary. And this leads to another absolutely critical role anthropologists play, documenting and protecting Indigenous knowledge. This work has led to incredible initiatives. You've got the traditional knowledge digital library, which basically acts as a digital fortress to stop corporations from patenting ancient medical remedies. You've got laws like the Biological Diversity Act, which now make it a legal requirement for communities to get a cut of the profits when their knowledge is used. This isn't just about preservation, it's about economic justice. And get this, for a perfect story of how that works, anthropologists working with the Kani tribe in Kerala learned about this local plant, Arogya Pasha. The tribe knew it boosted energy. So researchers studied it, and bam, they developed a natural, energy-boosting medicine called Jivani. It's a total win-win. The world gets a new product, and the Kani tribe gets a share of the profits. Ancient wisdom, modern science, and real benefits for the community. But for all these incredible successes, we have to be honest. We can't ignore the massive challenges that still exist. And when you look at healthcare, the picture can be pretty grim. The gaps are just staggering. And this chart just makes that gap painfully, undeniably clear. Take a look. The national average for maternal mortality in India is 97 deaths per 100,000 births. Now look at the bar for tribal populations. It's over 200, more than double. That's not just a statistic, it's a crisis. And it's exactly this kind of life or death problem that you only see and can only begin to fix with that deep, on-the-ground understanding. Okay, so let's zoom out a little from tribal communities and look at the broader picture of rural development. Because out there, the hidden social dynamics are just as complicated and just as important. Now, this concept right here is an absolute game changer. The anthropologist M.N. Srinivas came up with this idea of the dominant caste. Basically, in many villages, one group holds all the cards: the land, the money, the political connections. If you're a planner coming in from the outside and you don't understand this invisible power structure, your project is doomed. At best, it'll fail. At worst, it'll just end up making the powerful even more powerful. And the Green Revolution is the textbook example of this exact blind spot. The plan, from way up high, seemed totally logical. Bring in these new high-yield seeds and watch food production soar. But the on-the-ground reality? For many small farmers, it was a catastrophe. They were pushed out of growing a mix of crops for their own families and into growing one single cash crop. They couldn't afford the expensive seeds and chemicals, they went deep into debt, and the whole system ended up benefiting the big, wealthy landowners. Of course, none of this is easy. You could have the best approach in the world, but anthropologists still run into some serious roadblocks out in the field. Good intentions alone just aren't enough. For one, there's this constant tension, this push and pull between development and preserving culture. Sure, a new farming method might bring in more money, but what if it destroys a social ritual that's been tied to the harvest for 1,000 years? It's a really delicate balancing act every single day. And then, oh man, then you have the bureaucracy. You can just imagine it, right? You spend a year in a village, you come back with these rich, nuanced human insights, and you're met with a government official who just wants you to fill out a form that has 3 checkboxes. That one-size-fits-all mindset can be a brick wall. And finally, the work itself is just loaded with tough ethical dilemmas. When you're the person connecting an isolated community to the wider world, you are right on the front lines of globalization. And there are no easy answers for what progress should even mean. That is a heavy, heavy weight to carry. So after all that, let's bring it all home. What's the ultimate takeaway? Why does this insider view, this anthropological approach, matter so much? Here's the bottom line. Development can't just be about data and dollars. It has to be about people. Anthropology provides that missing piece of the puzzle, that essential human context. It's the secret ingredient that turns a plan that looks good on paper into a solution that actually works in the real world, for real people. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. In our world today, a world that is completely obsessed with big data, algorithms, and scalable solutions, what is the real, irreplaceable value of simply taking the time for deep, patient, human understanding? Something to chew on.